to take away our freedoms in having access to natural remedies. And the whole theme underlying all this is to create a second EU, but they call it, of course, North American Union. And they've already started doing that. They started it with the North American Free Trade Agreement, just like they did with the European Community, you know, the coal and iron, steel, you know, free trade community here. And then they keep ratcheting it up slowly but surely, just like they're doing with the Lisbon Treaty. And then they had the Central American Free Trade Agreement, which specifically mentions Codex guidelines within it. Then they have this loosey-goosey trilateral cooperation charter where you saw the picture of Bush smiling and shaking the hands of the Canadian Prime Minister and the Mexican President as well, where they're starting to merge some of the agencies within the three countries. And they have these things called the NAFTA superhighways. They're going to cut these big highways right through the heart of the U.S. to connect Canada with Mexico and the U.S., of course, being in the middle. And they have these tri-country working groups, MUCH, which stands for Mexico, United States, Canada, Health. And they have this curious health fraud definition, which basically defines anything that provides a beneficial, I'll skip ahead so it's not so long, but right here, anything that basically provides a beneficial effect on health could be deemed by the agencies of Canada, Mexico, and the US to be a health fraud. So just what I mentioned about vitamin D, that would be deemed a health fraud. So I just committed health fraud by telling you that. So truth number 2, you've got to decentralize government whenever and wherever possible. I had an experience when I was a student in Paris, when I was in my 20s, that was kind of funny and relates to this, and that is that, and this sort of ties into this whole thing that Anthony Coughlin was talking about earlier today about the Lisbon Treaty and all of that, except I'm going to expand on it a little bit. But I was a student, I studied French and Spanish history at the Sorbonne in the 70s, and I remember going out my first or second week there in Paris, going out to a cafe at night time with some friends, and we were a small group of students, and with us was an attractive girl, and we sat down at a table, and next to us was this leering Frenchman, old guy. And I remember thinking, God, that guy's old. But now I think back at it, he's probably my age. Anyway, so he wanted to talk to us, and he really wanted to talk to the girl. But in any event, so he sneered at us because he knew we were Americans. And he said, "Your country doesn't even have a name," he said, huh? And I said, "Yes, we do. We're called the United States of America." You know, I stood up to defend, you know, the country. And he said, "No, that's not a name, that's a description." And so the conversation continued on other things. But, you know, I thought back on it, and I thought, you know what, he's right. That is a description. And why is that? Why is that? Well, it's because that was the whole concept of the founding of the United States. You know, that was just a description for all the states that had the real power. That was Virginia, New York, New Hampshire, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. Those were considered to be, by the U.S. Constitution and the preceding Articles of Confederation, those were to be where the power was, because the concept behind the United States was you had decentralized power, you diffuse power. Power is dangerous, it's not to be concentrated. Because when you think about it, who gets attracted to it? Again, it's this whole concept of captured agencies. You put power and you concentrate it in one spot, whether it's London, whether it's Brussels, whether it's Washington, D.C., who's attracted to it? It's not the ordinary decent citizens, it's the sociopaths. It's the people who love power, the power seekers. They're attracted to it like moths to a flame. They gather around it. Those are the people that spend time there. They know the rules, they know how to play the game. They accumulate even more power. They're the 27 people on the Commission, the European Commission. Are those the kind of people that you want telling you what to do? I don't think so. So the whole concept of the U.S. was very little power to Washington, D.C. In fact, the U.S. Constitution is a very curious revolutionary document in many ways, because it wasn't about giving power to the federal government. If you read in the Constitution itself, it talks almost exclusively about what powers the federal government doesn't have. And it only has powers that are enumerated in there. Specific powers are set forth, and then all other powers are reserved to the state. That's the 9th Amendment, part of the Bill of Rights. And then the 10th Amendment says, and those that aren't even reserved to the states are reserved to the individuals who live within the individual states. In fact, up until the start of the American Civil War in 1861, the average U.S. citizen had no daily interaction with the federal government except to go to the post office and interact with the postal agent there. That was his or her only contact for the most part, for the vast majority of American citizens, up until the start of the American Civil War. And then after the war, wars are really great for concentrating power in the hands of central government. That's one reason you want to avoid wars, because it always results in raised taxes, it always results in increased concentration of power in a central government and a lessening of liberties. I don't care if you won the war, you lost the war, you're going to lose. It's a Pyrrhic victory at best. So what you want to do is you really want to diffuse power, and by doing that you get power back to the people, because the more remote the rulers are from you, the less impact you're going to have on these people. That's why the Lisbon Treaty is so incredibly dangerous, because it violates this really fundamental principle of decentralizing power and keeping power diffuse and close to the people who are being ruled. Because then you can go, you think about it, you can go to your representative and you can look at him or her in the face and you can get an immediate feedback. But the more distant the feedback mechanism is from the people who are making the decisions, the more likely they are to be corrupt, the more likely they are to make mistakes, and the more likely they are that when they make mistakes, it will have huge impact. And that was the other thing about the United States. If Virginia passed a bad law, well, then there was still New York and all these other states that people could flee to live and prosper and not be damaged or harmed by that. And that was the other thing. But what we find today is so many people in our lives, and this is true in the United States as well as here, as well as France, they think government is God. They look to government as being the provider and be-all for everything in their lives, whether it's food, whether it's health care, I don't care. What it is, they look at government as God, but it's not. Government only has the power to give you what it's first taken from you. Now, it can redistribute wealth. Maybe, some people may think, oh, it's great, they can steal from productive people and give to the people who aren't producers. And, if that's your goal, then then do it. But that's not my view of the way things should be. And this is an example, the swine flu vaccinations are an example of a huge mistake that's going to be made, and that is in the process of being made now. First of all, it's a big lie. It has an incredibly low death rate. Actually, the death rate is higher from the injections, from the jabs, than it is from actually the swine flu itself. They've given it a frightening name of now H1N1 because that can alarm people more than others. But again, more people have died from ordinary flu than they even have from lightning strikes than they even have from swine flu. And again, if you have access to natural remedies, you can prevent getting it in the first place, or if, unfortunately, like I did, you fall victim to a flu, I wasn't swine flu, but a flu, there are ways to get out of it quickly and without much effort. So they want to scare you into taking this jab, and they try to tell you it's harmless, but embedded in each of these jabs is a very dangerous neurotoxin, mercury. Who would want to inject mercury into your body, into your bloodstream? This is a highly bioaccumulable heavy metal that is very, very difficult to get rid of and can cause severe injury, severe neurological damage, even death, and it has. But what do they argue? They argue, oh, everyone needs to be immunized, so we have herd immunity. This is their code word. Herd immunity to keep other people from catching it. But that's a myth. I mean, I'm part of the baby boomer generation, that was born during the time period 46 to 1960. And when we were immunized as children in the States, from smallpox and the like, we were all told, hey, this is lifetime